I'm grateful to be here. And I often like to begin in facilitation or in discussion contexts with poetry. I find that there is something about the way poetry is constructed and the way that it can be received that opens us up to a different kind of conversation than what we might be used to in our business day to day. So what I would like to invite you to do as we open to an experience of poetry first would be to roll your shoulders back and check in with how is your body at this moment in time? 7:10 p.m. for most of you, I believe, 10:10 p.m. on the East Coast for me. Just see, is there any part of your body that is particularly calling for a rub, a sweet little massage? Can you feel and sense the points of contact between your body and whatever it is that is supporting you? Looking down, feeling down into your feet and into your sits bones on the chair. I'm going to read a poem for us that is by a poet I love named Joy Ladin. And I'll invite you to just let the words wash over you. I'm going to ask afterward if there were any words, phrases, or images that stayed with you, that landed with you in a particular way. And I'll also share the link to the poem in the chat. So those of you on Zoom and those of you that are in the room later can access it. But as I read it, I'll just invite you to let them wash over you and notice what you notice about what lands. This is called Letter to My Body by Joy Ladin. Philosophers shilly-shally, but it's true. You are me, I am you. This dust, these rays, this strange internal sense that after all these years, I finally exist. All of this is only mine through you. You still seem surprised. That's part of your charm, that I wish to be extracted from your handsome bindings. This, you say, is only the beginning, which is why it feels like drowning in what we've both survived. Ever the politician, I say, I'll be your widow, smiling cheerfully as you die. Not yet, you say, as though this is the other part of your charm. You still believe in time. Violent laughter, yours and mine. Let's go out into the woods of meaning and matter among the laurels and the mustard, the unlit suns and unnamed branches, listening shoots and loosening leaves we only appreciate when we're drowning in one another. Let's break up before we meet and fall in love again in the darkening parlor of the heart. Let's wait for God in the gathering dusk and watch the stars come out. I'll invite you to take a breath. And I wonder, are there any words, images, phrases that landed with you, that caught your attention in that poem? If so, I'd invite you to shout them out, or if you're on Zoom, to unmute. I still exist, drowning in the chat. Living, dying, existing. So dust was something that landed for several of us. There is a teaching, in fact, I wasn't planning on sharing this, but because you just said the word dust, there is a teaching from my own tradition, from Judaism, a rabbinic teaching that each of us should carry around 2 pieces of paper at all times. And on one piece of paper, it says, "The world was created for me." And on the other piece of paper, it says, "I am but dust and ashes." And what is it like to hold both of those at once, one in one pocket, one in the other, and say, okay, I'm awake, I'm alive, and I'm open to the mystery of what it is to be alive. So I'm glad to know that dust in particular landed for some of you, and that sparked that teaching. Are there any other words, images, or phrases that stuck out that people want to name from the poem before we move into me introducing myself a little more? Yeah. And that there's a conversation going on between those aspects of ourselves, maybe internally. Thank you. Any last ones? For those that just came into the room, we read a poem, which I will share. I shared the link in the chat, and I'll send it to you, Leslie, afterwards as well, so you can share it more widely. Any last words, images, or phrases? Okay. So I wanted to start there because I love poetry, and I think that it opens interesting portals to what I think of as the spiritual dimension of life. Um, Also because Joy Layden is a trans woman who, in this particular poem, I think is writing out of a particular trans experience that I don't share as a cis man, and yet the way that she's framing that ongoing conversation between aspects of ourselves as we try to figure out how to just exist, as you were saying, that piece of the poem that landed for you, is something I recognize in a different way from my own experience of coming out various times over my life so far. And I'm excited to share with you about what I think of as coming out as a spiritual process. So I'm going to share screen and tell you a couple of, oops, I'm on the wrong screen. Give me one moment. Well, it's fine. I'll share it and I'll go back. I'm going to share screen and tell you a couple of short stories about myself as a way of orienting to why I'm here and what it means for us to have this conversation tonight. And after a short bit of talking, I'm then going to very much want to hear from you and engage with you on some of the themes that I'm presenting here. So it's a short bit of me talking and then a lot of us talking together. So I'd like to tell you a story about this man you see in front of you, which is me. This is from a few years ago, 2019, I think. I was at the Pride Parade in Providence, Rhode Island, where I went to college and where I used to live after that. And as you may be able to tell, in addition to my fabulous fairy wings, or whatever that multicolored extravagant experience behind me is, and in addition to my t-shirt, which references the upside down pink triangle, and in addition to those sparkly disco pants, which made me feel a little bit like Liza Minnelli as I was walking around the Pride Parade, you might be able to see that at the very bottom, I'm wearing some fabulous leopard print heels. And I knew when I came down to Providence that weekend, I was living in Boston at the time, and I came down specifically for the Pride Parade. I knew that this particular group of people that I was going to the parade with were going to dress up. I knew that that was part of the experience I was signing up for. And I had sensed for a while that it might be time for me to break that taboo, that societal taboo against wearing heels in public as a man. And I thought this was exactly the right group of people to do it with. And the night before the Pride Parade, we were all together in this beautiful, beloved apartment that I spent many, many, many days and nights in with lots of people that I knew. And we were trying on all the things. These friends have a huge closet full of dress up clothes. So we were trying on all the things and all figuring out our looks. And there's boas and there's, body suits and there's heels of all shapes and sizes coming out. And in the mirror that night, I was feeling myself. I looked in the mirror and I was like, yes, that is a really fabulous person that is ready to walk in the Pride Parade tomorrow. I can't wait to wear these heels, this outfit. I'm really going to just feel absolutely like a queen in every sense of the word. And I was excited about that. And the next day, when it came time to actually put on the heels for real and actually put on the outfit for real and process down the stairs and walk down the hill to get to the Pride Parade, I felt in my body a huge array of somatic alarm bells going off. Every piece of me was rebelling in this moment and saying, no, you cannot go out of the house dressed like this. It is dangerous. Someone will, at the very least, make fun of you. If not, who knows what other number of horrible things that could happen. No, 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 no. It is not safe. I felt this in my body. It was not a conscious thought process. It was every cell in my body telling me, turn away, hide, close the door, turn the lights off, go back in the closet, essentially. 2019, I had been out of the closet in some shape or form for 13 years. I was with many, many people that I trusted and loved. I was not expecting to have that reaction. And fortunately, I was able to turn to the people around me that I really felt connected to and say, hey, I'm freaking the F out right now. And I really want to go to this parade and I really want to have the experience that we all said we were going to have together, but I'm panicking and I need a little bit of help and support. And fortunately, with that group of friends at that time, I was able to take some breaths, take a hand, walk down the hill, and we had this fabulous night. And this is some of the photo documentation of that. But in order to tell you why 13 years after the first time I came out of the closet, I was still having this experience of panic, I have to tell you a little bit about this young man right here. I will share with you, what I learned, I remembered recently, this was a couple of years ago that my mom and I talked about this. I hated this picture as a kid and I would not let it be put up on the wall in our hallway where we had all of the other family photos. And I had forgotten that because in adult life, I think this is the best picture ever. But as a kid, I couldn't stand it. And the reason that I couldn't stand it, I do remember this, is that I was utterly convinced. So this was one of those photo booths in the malls in the 90s, right? Where you would go inside this little photo booth and they'd take a picture of you and they would, I guess it was not called Photoshop at that time. They would superimpose your head onto the body of something. And in this case, I didn't know what my head was being superimposed onto. And when the man at the photo booth presented this to me, I remember all of 4 or 5, maybe 6 years old thinking, oh, he's making fun of me. He's making fun of me because he knows somehow that I'm never going to be the kind of man that's going to be able to hold my arms up like this and really convince anyone with my muscles. He's making fun of me by superimposing me on this hyper masculine body. So already at the age of 4, 5, 6, whatever it was, there was this clear residue of the way that others in society had experienced me, had given me feedback. You're doing boyhood wrong. That was a clear message at all levels of process a lot of the time as a young kid. And I internalized that. I didn't know how to question that critically at that time and say, well, I actually would like to interrogate you on your definition of masculinity and boyhood. I didn't know how to do that yet. And so I just internalized it as like, oh, okay, I guess I'm doing boyhood wrong. And so in that moment, being presented with this image, which very well may have been lovingly crafted for me by a mall employee who assumed that I would love to have my face superimposed on this body. Instead, I had the experience of rupture, of disjoint, of a sense of, oh my God, you know something about me that I don't even know, and you're kind of pushing it back in my face. And so I tell you about these two versions of me because they are different versions of me, and yet they're also the same person, of course, living inside this body, this human experience at this moment in time. And even if I've come out in a very definitive way the first time I did in 2006, where I said to someone, I'm gay and I have a crush on this person and whatever. All these years later, there are moments, there continue to be moments where I continue to recognize, oh, there's that other part of me still that's still wounded. There's that other part of me that is still seeking to express and live in the world more fully and more authentically. There's still part of me that knows it's still time to come out again and again and again and again in different ways. And Leslie, you actually had mentioned to me over email that one of your recent presenters, I think specifically in the gender expansive group, had talked about coming in as another metaphor for a process. And without knowing too much about that and not wanting to appropriate it, if that's specifically coming from a gender expansive experience, which is a little bit different from where I'm coming from, there was still something I found very poetic and resonant about these two metaphors, coming out and coming into oneself, as something that really happens not once, but in various ways over the course of the lifespan. So I'll just tell you a very brief little bit about who I am and why I'm here and how I come to this conversation. I come to this conversation as a queer person, first and foremost. I have lived through the experience of coming out and coming in and continue to experience it in different ways. I come to this conversation on spirituality and queerness as a Jew specifically. That is where my spirituality is most rooted, although it also finds expression in other dimensions of my life. I come to this conversation specifically as a ritual leader, as a chaplain, a spiritual director, and a coach, each of which is a way of saying in different ways that it is a big part of my job to be present to and witness and hold space for other people's transformation of self in different capacities. So that's a big part of how I come to this conversation, is as a professional space holder for people's transformation. I come to this conversation as an artist. I find that my spirituality and my queerness are deeply intertwined in the domain of what it means to me to be an expressive, creative person. And I come to this conversation as someone passionate about the power of authenticity. I'm interested to know who else is in the room with me. And I think that for the purpose of getting into our conversation time shortly, which is most important to me, rather than me continuing to talk, I'll invite you, if and when you do share, to maybe briefly just say your name, and if there's one or two things you want to name about how you come to this conversation, whether it's I'm a parent or a friend of someone who has gone through a coming out process, I'm someone with a deep interest in spirituality and queerness myself, whatever it might be, I am interested to know how you got here. But to kind of close this opening framing so that we can get into this conversation together, I want to just share two quick resources. One is a definition of spirituality that I find particularly helpful as someone that works in an interfaith context and as someone who is has a complicated relationship with my own religiousness. That spirituality that I find very generous and open to multiple interpretations is that spirituality is the way we relate to ourselves, to others, and to all that is, whatever we would define as larger than ourselves, that we see ourselves as being in some kind of reciprocal relationship to. For some people, the idea of all that is very easily translatable to God. Either the word God doesn't feel complicated, or the particular image of God or concept of God that someone carries is different and doesn't feel like all that is. But I think all that is an expansive way of talking about not only a divine being, if that's something that's important in your personal worldview, but also, are there systems of values? Are there large concepts of meaning that have really undergirded your life? Is the very concept of the universe being an infinitely expanding thing that we're tiny, tiny specks in, something that moves and stirs your conscience? That might be a kind of all that is that you find yourself to be in relationship to. So that's one thing I want to share. And then I want to share these 7 core spiritual themes that I first learned when I was working as a chaplain at a place called Hebrew Senior Life. And although that particular context was very much rooted in elder care, I think these core spiritual themes really do show up in different ways across the lifespan. So when we were walking into patients' rooms as chaplains at Hebrew Senior Life, we were often listening. We didn't always explicitly name this, but we were often listening for these themes in conversations. Was the person we were talking to talking about love and belonging? Were they interested or wrestling with forgiveness and reconciliation? What was the place of trust in their lives, the place of hope? How did they find meaning? What were they expressing gratitude for or not able to express gratitude for, but yearning for gratitude? And what was their sense of identity? So with these two frames, I'll just quickly toggle back this first frame of spirituality as this relationship between self, others, and all that is, and this second frame of these 7 core spiritual themes that show up in our lives. What I'm interested to hear and to talk with you about, I'm interested to hear what you make of this, first of all, and how you've seen these kinds of spiritual themes show up in the lives of the people in your life that have gone through coming out processes. I'm wondering how you're seeing the relationship between the way I'm defining spirituality and the way that you've observed and experienced coming out processes in the lives of people that you hold dear. So I'm going to now go quiet. And I think this is probably also the time where we'll stop recording